A gloved human hand, clad in black, introduces a specific compound into the yolk of a chicken egg. A few minutes later, it undergoes division, resulting in the creation of an identical egg. Concurrently, on the renowned Hollywood Walk of Fame, a star is unveiled in commemoration of Oscar-winning actress Elizabeth Sparkle. As time progresses, the star's brilliance wanes, and the renown of Sparkle's name diminishes. She transitions to hosting an aerobics program on television. Despite her advancing years, she is in admirable physical shape, possessing a very attractive appearance. However, one day while seeking a restroom, she discovers the women's facility is out of order, prompting her to utilize the men's room. While inside a stall, she overhears a conversation between Harvey, the show's producer, expressing the belief that Elizabeth is passé and that the show requires a younger, more alluring host. It's time for Sparkle to step down, he states, reasoning that her Oscar win occurred during the nascent stage of filmmaking, and it's now necessary to give way to the upcoming generation. Disheartened, Elizabeth attends a lunch with the producer where he mockingly reveals her impending retirement before leaving with a companion. The woman notices a fly submerged in her wine and feels as helpless as it. En route to her residence, the actress is distracted by maintenance workers dismantling her billboard, which leads to an accident. At the hospital, the physician identifies a celebrity and praises her work, but the woman breaks into tears, lamenting that her fame is now a thing of the past. The embarrassed doctor bids her farewell and departs. However, a young nurse suddenly commences an examination of Elizabeth's back, murmuring that she'd be perfect for an experiment. Prior to his exit, he slips a memory stick into her pocket, containing an advertisement for a product known as Substance. Elizabeth reads the product's title just as she's hailed by an older man. It happens to be Fred, an old classmate of hers. He is overjoyed to see her and suggests they get together to reminisce about their youth. Fred jots down his phone number on a random scrap of paper, which he then dampens in a puddle, before handing it to Elizabeth, who feigns delight at seeing her old friend. In reality, she plunges into a deep depression, particularly after discovering a bouquet at her home, thanking her for her years of service to the show. Rereading the word "was," Elizabeth plugs the memory stick into the television and views an advertisement for a substance which, upon injection, unlocks her DNA and initiates cellular division, thereby creating another version of herself. This is the substance, and that persona is the matrix. And while they manifest as two distinct personalities, they are essentially the same person, albeit an enhanced iteration that is younger, more attractive, and more flawless. Both personalities must maintain a symbiotic relationship, swapping places every 7 days while continuously recognizing their singular nature. Elizabeth frequents a bar and, observing the contented couples there, acknowledges her isolation. She returns home and, after a period of deep reflection and reminiscing, dials the provided number and places an order for the substance. She's given a post office box number for collecting her product, and the call concludes swiftly. The woman spends a sleepless night, and the next day she discovers a classified advertisement in the local newspaper seeking candidates to replace her as the host of the show. Simultaneously, there's a letter in her mailbox with a card and the post office box number for the substance. Elizabeth heads with resolve to retrieve the package. Utilizing the card, she accesses a hidden entryway within an old structure and locates a storage space holding the awaiting package. Once home, Elizabeth unboxes it. Each component of the substance is meticulously packaged into pouches and labeled activator, stabilizer, the other you, the switch, food for the matrix, and food for the other you. The activator is only to be administered once, whereas the stabilizer requires daily injection. Its source is the cells of the matrix. Critically, the pair must exchange places every 7 days without fail, and always be mindful that they are, in fact, a single entity. In the morning, Elizabeth dedicates a significant amount of time to gazing at her reflection in the mirror, observing the signs of aging. Ultimately, she injects the one-time activator and is subsequently overcome with excruciating pain. The woman collapses to the floor, writhing in agony as her back splits open and her younger doppelganger emerges. This fresh persona gradually regains awareness, and upon observing herself in the mirror, sees the reflection of a youthful and exceedingly beautiful girl. For a time, she revels in her newfound state, but then notices Elizabeth's body. The girl first tidies it, stitching up the horrendous tear in its back. Then she heads to her bed. In the morning, the girl showers and suddenly feels unwell. She retrieves special syringes and injects herself with the stabilizer extracted from the spinal column of the unconscious matrix, Elizabeth. Afterwards, she proceeds to the living room, elated with her new youthful and robust form. Later on, the girl participates in a casting call, having purchased a provocative swimsuit on the way. She adopts the moniker Sue, making an impressive impact on the assistant producers and ultimately on Harvey himself. Sue is chosen as Elizabeth's replacement for hosting the show, although she immediately cautions that every 7 days she will be absent to care for her ailing mother. This fully captivates Harvey, convinced the audience will adore it. Sue begins to delight in the stardom that once belonged to the original version. However, the week concludes rapidly, and the time for the swap arrives. Sue attaches specific tubing to her arms, allowing the substance to flow through. Soon, Elizabeth regains consciousness, while Sue's physical form descends into a comatose state. The woman cleans herself up and proceeds to the television studio, where Harvey presents her with a gift from the crew. Back home, Elizabeth marks the days that she can be herself on her calendar. She confines herself to her home during that time. At the week's end, she receives a notification about a new supply of the substance delivered to her post office box. After 7 days, they switch again. Sue enjoys her new life, featuring in commercials and basking in her escalating popularity. But eventually, she finds herself contemplating the body of the Matrix and constructs a covert chamber within the bathroom. The moment she finishes, a neighbor knocks, protesting the noise stemming from her tools. Upon seeing Sue, the man is instantly smitten and offers his support, but the girl slams the door and conceals Elizabeth's body within the clandestine room, replacing her portrait on the wall with one of herself. Sue's show achieves phenomenal success with ratings soaring, much to the producer's pleasure. The girl starts cultivating new friendships and attending parties. One evening, she takes a young man home, but as things grow intimate, she abruptly feels ill, recollecting that the time has come for the switch. Sue rushes to the hidden room and undertakes an additional stabilization procedure. She spends the night with the young man and swaps back with Elizabeth later than necessary. When Elizabeth awakens, she sees the living room in disarray and her hands twisted with gout. With considerable struggle, she puts herself back together and calls the substance provider's number, only to be informed that the changes are irreversible and reminded that they are one single entity. Elizabeth cleans up her apartment and then watches a recording of Sue's new show on TV. She is forced to acknowledge that Sue is extraordinarily beautiful. Later, she overhears the neighbor asking Sue for a date, but she doesn't answer the door. She subsequently receives a new shipment of the substance. While venturing out, she makes a stop at a cafe where a senior gentleman starts up a conversation, lamenting that the 7-day wait for returning to one's body is far too long. He drops his cards, and among them, Elizabeth notices a card that mirrors her own substance card. She recognizes the young nurse who had recommended the experiment to her. In his eyes, she recognizes the knowledge that with every repetition, it gets increasingly difficult to recall that one deserves the right to exist. Soon, the second aspect will quite literally begin to consume her. Elizabeth dashes back to her home, bumping into Sue's boyfriend, who of course does not recognize her, but this makes her recall Fred. She dials his number, and her delighted classmate plans a rendezvous at a cafe. Elizabeth dresses up, applies makeup, and conceals her hands under gloves, but unexpectedly catches sight of a billboard featuring Sue. Her reflection disappoints her, and she alters her makeup, subsequently removing it completely while weeping. She rips her dress off and confines herself to her home, ignoring Fred's persistent calls, binge eating to mitigate her stress and insecurity. When it becomes Sue's turn again, she steps onto the set and initiates the show. However, during the physical exercises, she suddenly senses something protruding beneath the skin of her buttocks. The girl instantly halts filming, and while the perplexed cameraman is trying to comprehend what he just captured, she hurries to the bathroom, where she discovers a lump on her rear and pulls out a fried chicken leg from her navel. She realizes that while she's living the high life, Elizabeth is binge eating back at home. Sue is incensed. She complains to the substance operator, only to receive the response, "They are one whole." Weeks pass. One day, Sue urgently summons Harvey to announce that she will be the new host of their New Year's show, the pinnacle of her career. Sue is ecstatic. However, she is now abusing the stabilizer more and more, which causes Elizabeth's body to age rapidly. When Elizabeth awakens again, she finds herself aged and decrepit with stiff joints, almost entirely gray hair. The woman contacts the substance operator, and he suggests ending the experiment, though there is no means of reversing her present condition. She endeavors to convince herself to cease the experiment, but she cannot let go of such a beautiful second version of herself. Even though her knees barely function, she remembers Harvey's gift. As it turns out, it's a cookbook, and Elizabeth immerses herself in learning new recipes with renewed enthusiasm, while Sue continues to dominate TV screens. One day, Elizabeth overhears Sue ridiculing her, mocking the aging star, which drives her to consume even more. Elizabeth becomes so enraged that she swears to end the experiment. The day for the swap comes, and again, Sue finds a room full of leftovers and empty bottles. To secure her independence and leverage the Matrix's helplessness, Sue stockpiles stabilizers for 3 months. However, the day before the live broadcast of the show, the stabilizer runs out. Sue calls the supplier to ask for more, but he says Elizabeth is the only source, and they need to switch in order to replenish the supply. There is simply no other option. Sue, barely conscious, starts the switch. Her boyfriend hears strange noises coming from the bathroom, but the girl doesn't open the door because inside is now a hideous, bald woman with a deformed hump. Finally, she yells at him and he runs off. Elizabeth, now a horrific creature, calls the substance operator and begs to end the experiment. Then she heads out for the final batch. Returning home, she drags Sue's body into the living room and prepares to inject her with the serum that will eliminate her duplicate. With the syringe prepared, she looks around, staring at the portraits of Sue for a long time. She realizes she cannot kill her younger version. Elizabeth brings Sue back to consciousness. Seeing the half-empty syringe and realizing what Elizabeth had intended, Sue flies into a rage, beating her Matrix to death. Afterwards, she goes to the New Year's show. She is adorned in a gorgeous gown, but suddenly Sue feels unwell and runs to the bathroom. As it turns out, with the Matrix dead, Sue's body begins to deteriorate rapidly. Initially, her teeth start falling out, rendering it impossible for her to smile for the sponsors, which Harvey desperately wants. Then a fingernail falls off and her ear drops off. In a panic, Sue rushes home where she injects herself with the last of the activator, hoping to create a new version of herself. But instead, a monstrous hybrid of both versions, Eliza Sue, is born. The monster recalls her audition and attempts to enhance her appearance by donning a dress and a homemade Elizabeth mask prior to heading to the show. When she arrives at the TV center, she steps onto the stage and addresses the audience, but her mask falls off. Shrieks of terror fill the hall, and she is labeled a monster. The audience flees in panic, and one man decapitates Eliza Sue, after which her mutilated body floods the entire hall with blood. What's left of Eliza Sue runs out of the studio and out onto the street. It disintegrates into guts. Elizabeth's original face manages to crawl to the actress's star on the Walk of Fame, where it looks up, smiles, and melts away. The next morning, the residual puddle of blood is scrubbed away, erasing the memory of the actress.